So good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's Regional Labour Market Analysis webinar. My name is Charlotte Horobin. I'm the Chief Executive at the Cambridgeshire Chambers of Commerce, and I'm delighted this morning that we're being joined by Mike and Hannah, who will be delivering our expertise over the last quarter's labour market trends and what are we seeing out in the skills, training and employment arena. But more importantly, how are you, our stakeholders, also working together, and perhaps where are there gaps that we can all get behind to make sure that as a region we're on our toes and as competitive and supporting the skills and talent for the future. This session will be recorded just for the presentation element, and towards the end we will have a great amount of time for those that want to stay for Q&A and for a discussion. We really do welcome your input, thoughts and feedback, but we will just be recording the actual presentation. Please do keep yourselves on mute, and towards the end, when you want to be able to contribute throughout, you'll be able to use the chat function, but later on you will be able to hopefully contribute with Mike, Hannah and Connor will be comparing that session. Now, in August, we were delighted to be able to publish the inaugural progress report for the Local Skills Improvement Plan. And this is the second of the quarterly regional labour market analysis webinars that we've hosted, the first being in July. And today, of course, we're in September. Moving forwards, the next session will be November, which will make sure that you've got in your diaries. But this is really to make sure that the skills data moves so quickly, the great work that you're all doing moves so quickly, and we want to make sure that we're really bringing to life what's happening in the region, where are the great successes that we can capitalise upon, but also where do we need to take further action. So I will now hand over to Mike and Hannah, who will take us through the latest quarter's data, the insight and information. But as we say towards the end, we really do encourage your discussion, your insight and welcome questions. So Mike, Hannah, can I hand over to you? Thank you.
Excellent. So thanks for the introduction, Charlotte. So just a few words about me, and I'll hand over to my colleague Hannah in just a second. My name's Mike Spice. I run a small economic development consultancy called Policy Department, and we support organisations here in Cambridge and Peterborough and around the country with economic strategies and skills strategies. Also, we've been working with the Chamber for a while now on their analytical requirements for the employer-led skills planning that they lead in this part of the world. And as Charlotte just said a second ago, we do these seminars now. This is the second of two quarterly ones, and the reason that we do this is to really kind of share with all of you, our partners, the results of the analytical work that we do to keep on top of developments that are happening in the labour market. The Local Skills Improvement Plan itself can only be produced at a point in time, but our understanding is evolving all of the time of what's going on in the labour market. And it's really important that all of our partners are able to share in that insight that we bring together from official data and also from the discussions that we have with you and other organisations. So in the time that we have today, we will have workshop sessions built in. So please, if you do have a comment or a question, do put them in the chat, but we'll pick them up, all of them, in the workshop. So there will be time for us to discuss, but we'll pick them up at those points. The presentation itself will be split into themed sections. I'll introduce it, and then Hannah will dive into some of the detail of that. And then at the end, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the uncertainties, some of the trends that we want to keep a close eye on, where we really want to focus on in discussions with partners, and where it'd be really good to kind of throw it out to you guys and get your thoughts on it too. It's a collective effort to get on top of the labour market and what's happening on it. So we've got a few prompts for discussion that it would be great to progress in the time we have now. So before I can dive into the meat of the presentation, Hannah, can you just introduce yourself and your role?
Yeah, hello, I'm Hannah Lazarus. I work with Policy Department as an economic and labour market analyst, and have produced much of the analytical work for the Chamber's LSIP quarterly reports. So as Mike said, I'll be going through some of the data in more depth as we get through the presentation.
I should say as well that the number of slides that we actually speak to will be smaller than the number of slides in the deck. That's a bit deliberate. It means that if there are questions, or somebody wants to go into the detail a bit, we can pick that up as well. So we will be skipping over slides, but don't worry, there will be an opportunity to go back to any of them if that is the desire of the group, if that aids the discussion. But without any further ado, just to say a little bit about the background to all of this. So the purpose of the work that we do through the report and through this webinar is to gather in-depth labour market information. And the labour market's a big, complex thing, so there's lots to look at. But what we're really trying to do is get a comprehensive overview of what's going on. There's lots of sources of information, and actually the number and the range of data that we're including in our work is expanding all of the time. So, for example, in future reports and in future presentations, we'll be including data that we've pulled together with the help of organisations like Cambridge Ahead into some sort of more granular detail around what's going on in certain sectors and clusters of our economy. But the purpose is to keep you guys updated, and it complements broader LSIP efforts as well. So Charlotte talks about the progress report, which goes into some detail about the activities that have been delivered in the following up on the local skills improvement plan. Some of the data from this report was in that progress report, so it complements the sort of broader delivery and tracking of that plan. So I'm going to start off with three of the kind of key messages really to take away, and then we'll go into some more detail and go section by section. But I guess the three big areas to think about takeaway. Firstly, labour market trends and challenges. So it is our view that our area's labour market has weakened in the year up to spring of this year. There is a bit of a lag with some labour market data, but we can say that it weakened in the year to spring, with employment declining and unemployment reaching a recent high. Economic inactivity, that's people not participating in the labour market, is high, and due to long-term illness, that section of the labour market, the numbers of people outside the labour market due to illness has increased. And we've got particular areas of our region that worry us a little bit. So claimant unemployment rising sharply in Peterborough, and Fenland's working age population decreasing as young people left. And we'll go into a little bit more detail about that in the presentation. We look closely at what companies are advertising, so on the jobs boards, and we can say that jobs posting data shows a slowdown in the number of new vacancies, but they still remain above their long-term average. Some occupations, and this probably isn't much of a surprise, but some occupations, notably teaching, are bucking the trend with increasing numbers of vacancies. So these are our shortage occupations. And job postings for digital occupations have fallen significantly. As we'll discuss, this doesn't necessarily mean that the numbers of people working in those sectors have gone down. We'll get onto that. But when we look at the new postings of jobs data, those are the trends that we're seeing. And again, it probably doesn't surprise anybody, but the NHS remains the largest recruiter of new staff in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. We look at qualifications attainment and the disparities. Those are quite significant, the disparities in attainment of qualifications across our part of the world. And so we see significant disparities between the different local authority areas that make up Cambridge and Peterborough. So while attainment is increasing overall, Fenland and Peterborough continue to have well below average rates, and we'll get onto those shortly. But basically what these disparities, these kind of intra-regional disparities highlight is the need for targeted solutions depending on the issue and the area. So I'm going to focus the first section on labour market participation, and Hannah's going to show us a few charts that go into more detail. But the key messages to take away about labour market participation. So, as I said, the labour market cooled in the year to spring, with employment among residents of this part of the world falling to a recent low, lowest for 3 years. And that net decrease was driven by a number of factors. So falling employment in Fenland, Peterborough, Huntingdonshire and South Cambridgeshire, a fall in employment for particular demographics, such as those under 50, and a fall in employment in certain sections of the economy, particularly public administration, education and health, and large falls in occupational employments. That's occupational categories across different sectors, for example, in elementary administrative roles. So, probably said unemployment rose sharply to a 10-year high, remaining highest in Peterborough and Fenland. And the working age population has decreased specifically in Fenland and Huntingdonshire, with some implications for labour supply and the growth of businesses in those areas. And we'll say a little bit about that in the presentation. But Hannah, you're going to take us through some of the detail, aren't you, for this? So if you could just take over.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so as Mike mentioned, the labour market in our area of the world, it weakened in the year to March 2024, in line with the general weakening of the UK economy. So the region's employment rate fell to a 3-year low, although it wasn't a sharp drop. It was remained at kind of 77.7%, so it was higher than the long-term average. But within the region, the employment rate fell everywhere apart from Fenland and Huntingdonshire. But even here, the numbers of people in employment fell. And we kind of had this strange situation where the working age population, the denominator for the employment rate, also fell in Fenland and Huntingdonshire, which kind of strangely led to a kind of rise in their employment rates. But if we move on to slide 8, this demonstrates the fall in the working age population in Fenland and Huntingdonshire in the year to March 2024. And in Fenland, at least, this is backed up by official population statistics, which show that Fenland's working age population has been falling since 2017, and there's been a particularly sharp fall in the number of 18 to 24-year-olds living in the area, possibly as they've been leaving for educational work opportunities elsewhere. And there's also been a fall in the number of 25 to 49-year-olds in Finland. So obviously, if this continues over the long term, it will have implications for labour supply in an area that's already kind of experiencing some sort of recruitment difficulties. But just going back to labour market participation as well, as Mike mentioned, it's kind of Peterborough that's causing us the most concern at the moment. So the labour market statistics suggest that the employment rate has fallen to its lowest level in 11 years. And this is also reflected in claimant unemployment rate data. So this is the share of people claiming unemployment related benefits and seeking work. So this has risen sharply in Peterborough since December 2023. So obviously this is something we'll be keeping an eye on over the next quarter. But if you have any insights or observations into any of these trends, please do pop a comment in the chat.
Moving on to local jobs markets, so just picking up some highlights from there. If we look at sort of sectors and clusters, so one of the real challenges that we have there is to do with the quality of the data. So unfortunately, when we look at data for the labour market, it'd be great to be able to say that it's 100%, accurate, and we can be completely confident in the quality of it. Unfortunately, for a variety of reasons, some of the labour market data, particularly at the subnational level, but actually also at the national level, has had a decline in quality, at least according to some of the top analysts in this field, including at the Bank of England, who have raised some concerns about the quality of the data that they're looking at as they determine monetary policy. So a bit of a caveat here that we'll be working with other organisations to try and expand the range of proprietary information that we use to see what's going on within the sort of priority growth sectors and clusters within Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, so digital and IT, advanced manufacturing and materials, agri-tech and life sciences. The official data show that jobs fell in advanced manufacturing and materials and digital and IT in 2022, increasing for agri-tech and life sciences, but remaining below their pre-pandemic peaks. However, it has to be said that some of the data sources, some of the proprietary stuff, does show a rosier picture. So we'll come back to that and in future slides, but it's just something that we want to put out there as, one thing to take away from that is actually the importance of having those kind of stakeholder relationships when we think about analysing the labour market. It can't just be about looking at data. It has to be about, taking the quality of that and with our partners. But again, just picking up a few kind of highlights, if you look at an occupational categories, programmers and software development professionals continue to be the most in-demand occupations in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough overall, but they do now account for a much lower share of job postings compared to some years ago, and demand is concentrated in certain parts of the region, specifically Cambridge and South Cambridgeshire. Hannah's going to take us through some of the detail of areas and sectors in the coming slides. So Hannah, if I head over to slide 13.
Yeah, okay, so there's some information now to see who's recruiting at the moment. So even though we've had a fall in the employment rate, there's still lots of recruitment activity going on as employers recruit for new posts and also for vacant posts or existing posts that have become vacant. So our job postings data that we use provides us with information on who's advertising for new and vacant roles. So in the first half of this year, the NHS remained by far the top recruiter of jobs in our region, with almost 5,000 job postings, which accounted for 1 in every 16 job postings in the region. And this was followed by the University of Cambridge and Cambridgeshire County Council. And then tech company Arm was also the biggest private sector recruiter with just over 300 postings. So if we move on to the next slide, at district level, the NHS was the top recruiter in all 6 areas, particularly in South Cambridgeshire, where it accounted for 1 in every 9 job postings. So in Cambridge, after the NHS, top recruiters included the University of Cambridge, Arm, Cambridge University Press and AstraZeneca. In East Cambridgeshire, it was the manufacturing company Thor Labs in Ely, logistics company DS Smith, the school holiday childcare provider Barracudas, and the social housing provider Sanctuary Group. And then in Fenland, top recruiters are dominated by care companies. So we have Barchester, CareTech and Fullbridge, and also Cambion Group, which is a children's special education and healthcare provider. In Huntingdonshire, after the NHS, we had local authorities, so Cambridge County Council and Huntingdonshire District Council, along with Anglian Water and Barracudas again. In Peterborough, next slide, so it's the City Council, Caterpillar and Anglian Water. And in South Cambridgeshire, after the NHS, we had Tesco and care providers again, so Barchester, Excel Care and East Anglia Children's Hospices.
Thanks, Hannah. So skills gaps and shortages. So we know that recruitment difficulties, if we take a perspective over the years, increased considerably between 2019 and 2022. But the jobs postings data suggests that recruitment difficulties have since fallen since early 2023, but are highest in Cambridge. Recruitment difficulties are highest for care workers and home care, is something that we flagged up in the previous workshop and that we'll touch on again later today, but also specialist medical practitioners and primary education teachers. Again, something that we flagged in this forum before, but we'll get onto that in the discussion. At a local authority level, so care workers, home carers feature within the most difficult to recruit occupations. In a range of places, Cambridgeshire, East Cambridgeshire, Huntingdonshire and Peterborough. There's a little evidence of change in the incidence. There was little change in the incidence of skills gaps. So that's existing workers deemed not to be fully proficient over the 3 years to 2022. And skills gaps were highest in information and communication and hotels and restaurants. Hannah's going to take us through a few the details in the following slides.
Yeah, so some information now on hard to recruit occupations. So the following slides show occupations experiencing recruitment difficulties. So those that took longest to fill in the first half of this year by local authority area. So as Mike mentioned, care workers feature most frequently. And in Cambridge, it took longest on average to recruit for specialist medical practitioners at 30 days, and then at 29 days for care workers, health managers, childcare practitioners, retail assistants, and higher education teaching professionals. In East Cambridgeshire, it took longest to recruit for higher health associate professionals and then hospitality staff, so bar staff and kitchen and catering assistants. In Finland, this had the largest number of hard to recruit occupations, particularly construction, trades, gardeners and bar and catering supervisors. And given the issues, which we'll come on to soon, about poor educational outcomes in Finland, it's also perhaps worrying to see a number of professions here that work with young people within this list. So primary school teachers, early education and childcare practitioners and youth workers. And then in Huntingdonshire, care workers and primary school teachers were hardest to recruit. In Peterborough, vacancies for specialist medical practitioners, nurse practitioners and care workers took longest to fill. And then South Cambridgeshire had just one occupation with a median posting duration of 28 days or over, and this was for social workers. So again, if you have any insights or observations into any of this, then please let us know in the chat.
Thanks. So moving on to education and training, we've already picked up, of course, some of the themes around recruitment difficulties in that sector. Some highlights before we go into the detail. So Cambridgeshire and Peterborough's local authority areas had some of the highest and lowest GCSE scores in England in 2022, 2023. GCSE performance improved and rose further above the England average in Cambridge and East Cambridgeshire, but has fallen and moved further below the England average in Finland. Participation in education and training among 16 and 17-year-olds rose slightly last year and overtook the national average, and this was driven by apprenticeship participation. Progression to higher education increased in 21-22 to a new record high, but remained below the national average. T-level level participation is underrepresented in the east of England compared to other parts of the country. Cambridgeshire and Peterborough has a below average rate of 19-year-olds achieving a level 2 qualification, with Finland having one of the lowest rates in England. Level 3 attainment at age 19, also slightly below average, with Finland also having one of the lowest rates in England. A return to exams following pandemic-related grading changes could be behind some of the drop in level 3 attainment in the last year. And then just before we move on, so apprenticeship achievements fell in 23-24 to the lowest level in the 6 years of data that are available, with a fall in achievements across all apprenticeship levels. And crucially, and last but not necessarily least, the percentage of employees receiving job-related training has also fallen, particularly in Peterborough and for public sector workers. So Hannah, you're going to go and dive into a few of these points in more detail. Over to you.
Okay, so one of the indicators that we've looked at to review how young people are performing is in education is the Attainment 8 score. So this converts GCSE grades into points. And this chart here shows the average Attainment 8 scores at local authority level in 2022-23 relative to the England average, and compares this to pre-pandemic rates, so in 2018-19. So as Mike mentioned, this shows significant disparity within the region, with Attainment 8 scores being well above average in Cambridge and South Cambridgeshire and well below average in Finland and Peterborough. And then comparing pre and post-pandemic performance also, average Attainment 8 scores across England dropped very slightly over this period by 0.4 points, but declined more sharply in Finland by 2.4 points, meaning that the gap with the England average widened. So before the pandemic, the average score was 11% below average, and then after the pandemic, it was 16% below average. So this highlights that the negative educational impacts of the pandemic are likely to have affected Finland's children more significantly than the national picture.
Thanks, Hannah. So I think the next, there's a lot of data here, and we can come back to them potentially in the discussion. But just moving things along swiftly. So we do have sections within the reporting that relate specifically to digital skills, green skills, and soft skills. So we're just going to say a bit about those now as sort of priority areas within the local skills improvement plan. So some key takeaways here. Firstly, 1 in 11 people working in our part of the world are employed in digital occupations, and the digital employment rates are highest in South Cambs, Cambridge, and Peterborough, and lowest in the rural fens, particularly Huntingdonshire. The number of digital workers, and we'll get on to a little bit about definitions later perhaps. The number of digital workers increased by over 50% over the past 5 years, against a fall in employment in other occupations. Programmers and software development professionals account for almost 1/3 of all digital workers and are the most in-demand occupation across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough's job market. The digital employment rate across Cambridge and Peterborough increased from 1 in 17 to 1 in 11 workers in just 5 years. So really speedy increase in its importance in recent years, with digital employment growing fastest in East Cambridgeshire, Fenland, and Peterborough. ARM, the University of Cambridge, and the NHS are the biggest recruiters of digital workers. And an analysis of online job postings, so these are the big recruitment platforms that employers advertise on and that give us really up-to-date information on what's going on. Analysis of those across our part of the world over the past 5 years shows that 17 of the 50 most requested specialised skills within all vacant posts were digital skills. However, over the past 6 months, far fewer digital skills featured within the top 50 specialised skills requested in job postings. So Hannah, you're going to go into a little bit more detail, I think. For those who are interested, we've got some definitional information within the report and within the presentation, which you're happy to look at that at your leisure, but we'll skip over that for now. But that gives information about occupational categories that we use to describe digital workers. But Hannah, you're going to go on to the most digital skills requested.
Yeah, so this table shows digital skills most requested in job postings in different areas of the region in the first half of this year. So Microsoft applications, so Microsoft Excel, Office and Outlook feature within all areas and are the most requested digital skills in some areas, so East Cambridgeshire, Peterborough and South Cambridgeshire. Data analysis features within all areas and is the most common digital skill requested in Huntingdonshire. Computer literacy features in all areas outside of Cambridge and is the most requested digital skill in Fenland. Automation also features in all areas outside Cambridge, and this is using machines to perform tasks with minimal human output. So this could obviously have implications for labour demand for some occupations, particularly elementary administrative occupations, which, as Mike mentioned earlier, have declined sharply over the last year and are forecast to decline over the next 20 years. And we also have software development, software engineering and programming languages featuring heavily in Cambridge and South Cambridgeshire, with Python being the most common digital skill requested in Cambridge. And then we have manufacturing related digital skills such as computer aided design, which feature within the top 10 in East Cambridgeshire, Fenland, Huntingdonshire and Peterborough. So there are kind of commonalities across all areas, such as demand for basic digital skills and data analysis skills, but also different industrial structures, which mean that certain digital skills are more prevalent in some areas than others.
Thanks, Hannah. So we're on to our kind of penultimate section of the reporting back on the data. So not too many more slides to go. But green skills is another priority within the LSIP. So 1/3 of people working in Cambridge and Peterborough are employed in occupations that will be affected by the transition to a green economy. East Cambridgeshire has the highest rate of employment in occupations affected by greening. And across our part of the world, the construction sector has by far the highest share of workers employed in occupations that are affected by the green transition. So pipe fitters are expected to be the fastest growing green occupation in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough from now until 2031. And job postings requesting specialist green skills have more than doubled over the past 5 years. And by far the top green skill requested over the past 5 years has been waste management. While the top green skill requested over the past 6 months has been water treatment. The University of Cambridge, by far the top recruiter of workers with green skills over the past 5 years. Engineering occupations, they do feature quite strongly within the occupations most likely to require green skills. The top industry requesting them has been by far professional, scientific and technical activities. So that would include jobs including consultancy and roles in compliance and so on.
So again, this table shows us the top green skills requested in job postings in different areas of the region over the last 5 years. So as Mike mentioned, waste management and environment, health and safety featured within the top green skills requested in job postings in all 6 areas. And at industry level, company level, waste management was most requested by the University of Cambridge, the biotech company Avantor and the NHS. And then environment, health and safety was most requested by AstraZeneca and Costain. And then skills featuring within 4 or 5 areas included ecology, electric vehicles, environmental resource management, ISO 14000 series, renewable energy and water treatment. And then there were some green skills that were specific to just one local authority area. So these included environmental protocols, so the knowledge of those international agreements in Cambridge, which were most requested by the European Molecular Biology Laboratory and AstraZeneca. And then in East Cambridgeshire, we had environmental issue and environmental permitting, which were most requested by the Environment Agency. In Finland, we had energy management, most requested by the facilities management and cleaning company OCS, and also plastic recycling and waste packaging, which were most requested by recruiters of agency workers. And then in South Cambridgeshire, we had net zero, most requested by the NHS, and waste collection, which was most requested by local authorities.
Thanks, Hannah. And then just to finish up, so soft skills, these are the most requested skills in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, all soft skills across all job postings of the past 5 years. The top 9 skills that were requested were all soft skills, while soft skills accounted for 18 of the top 25 skills. Perhaps not a surprise, but communication is by far the most requested skill. It's requested 4.5 times as much as the most specialised skill in demand, which is project management, with management, customer service, being detail-oriented, sales, planning, research, leadership, problem solving, also more requested than any specialised skill, that is, skills that are tied to particular occupations or particular sectors. The 25 most requested soft skills in Cambridge and Peterborough can be grouped into 5 categories. So analytical or creative skills, interpersonal skills, self-management skills, leadership skills and knowledge transfer skills. And this is a useful way of thinking about them as we look at the data relating to them. So Hannah, you're going to say a little bit about the detail.
Okay, so here we've got the top 3 soft skills requested by industry sector over the past 5 years. So communication featured as a top 3 skill within all industry sectors and as a top skill in all sectors apart from mining and quarrying, wholesale and retail, accommodation, food services and education. Management also featured as a top 3 skill in 14 of the 19 sectors, and customer service featured as a top 3 skill in 12 sectors and was the top skill in, unsurprisingly, customer facing sectors such as wholesale and retail and accommodation and food services such as hotels and restaurants. And perhaps more surprisingly in mining and quarrying, although when you look at this in more detail, the database that we use allocates BP as anything to do with BP into mining and quarrying, but this looks like it's mainly sales assistants in BP garages, which will be more usually classed as retail in official statistics. And then other skills featuring within the top 3 skills by industry included being detailed orientated in agriculture, leadership in manufacturing and health, operations in the energy sector, sales in wholesale and retail and real estate, research in agriculture, information and communication and education, unsurprisingly, teaching skills within education, and then planning in public administration.
Right. So I think that takes us to the end of our canter. Forward priorities for insight. So as I just mentioned there, the labour market, it's constantly evolving. There are long-standing issues such as those that we've just talked about then, but there are also there's a lot of fast-moving currents within the labour market. So we need to check in quite regularly to see how those are going. What we've done is we've identified a number of issues, trends, questions that we want to spend a bit more time on over the next quarter as we put together the next report. And we'll be doing that with your help as stakeholders. So it's not just data, it is the discussions that we're having with stakeholders. So I'm going to list those on the screen, just quickly go through them, and then hopefully there'll be prompts for discussion in the time that we have left. So we've got 9 on the screen here, so I'll rattle through them. And the first is the declines in occupational employment relevant to education and training provision. So some of those challenges of recruitment within education and training, clearly a concern for a variety of reasons. The delivery of the LSIP itself, of course, but also where those things show up in primary education, secondary education. We're talking about the interface with young people at a crucial age. So, of course, those things are a concern to us. We'd like to understand them better, the numbers of teachers and trainers and so on. We'd like to understand more about the impact on employers of rising inactivity that's due to long-term sickness. It's a trend that's seen across the UK, but it also finds its expression here in Cambridge and Peterborough. We'd like to understand a bit more about the changes to job numbers across Cambridge and Peterborough's priority sectors for economic development. So this would include digital, agri-tech, life sciences, advanced manufacturing, materials. We've got data sources pointing in different directions. So, company level data suggesting that the job market is buoyant or more buoyant than perhaps the recruitment platforms would suggest. So understanding a bit more about how companies within those sectors are managing their workforce development, managing skills pressures and things like that. We need to know a bit more about the churn of people through those sectors and what that might mean for employer-led skills planning. We've already touched on this to a decent extent, but a labour market exclusion and poor outcomes for young people, particularly in Finland. So the report touches on that in a number of different ways, but it's something that we'd really like to go into more depth, picking up some of the issues that others have picked up, like social mobility and so on. The recent labour market decline in Peterborough is another. The decline in employer training to record low levels, especially for instruction in new technology. Bit of an odd one that you'd expect perhaps in this technologically enabled age that might be increasing, but the decline in it is something we want to understand a bit more, whether that reflects some sort of structural change within the provision of training. Again, we want to know what's going on there. We want to understand the likely impact on future digital skills demand from recent advances in AI and other industry developments. You'll remember perhaps from some of the slides that we showed up that there's some evidence actually of declining employment in certain occupations, like elementary administrative occupations that are the focus of some AI services at the moment. So we'd like to understand the impacts of AI on the structure of the economy more generally, but how it plays out in the labour market. We need to know a bit more about the detailed requirements behind the increased demand for green skills. And as Hannah picked up earlier in the presentation, the shortage of care workers in a number of places is, it comes across loud and clear in the data. So understanding what some of the, underlying issues are in a bit more detail and how that can be addressed in LSIP related activities. So I'm going to stop there. Those are the kind of, it's not an exhaustive list of things to pick up, but those are some things that we'd really like to spend a bit more time on in the next quarter in the conversations that we have with you and others, and in the research that we do. On the technical point about green skills, yeah. So Hannah, I'll bring you in a second, but the basic point I think for us is there's a number of different ways we can look at it. One is at an occupational level rather than at a kind of industry sector level. The other is paying close attention to what might be termed green skills and where they pop up in job adverts. So, within the report, we do a bit of a deep dive into where those skills requirements are popping up, as evidenced by job postings and kind of what the distribution of those is, both by area and by industry sector. But Hannah, I don't know if you wanted to come in and just say a few words about kind of how we deal with some of the definitional challenges around green skills.
Yeah, I mean, I've got some slides on it, I think. I don't know if you want to flick back to how we deal with trying to quantify number of people working in green occupations or what kind of skills are in demand. So if you go back a bit further, Mike, I think so within the report we use a bit kind of some definitions that have been used in other research to quantify the number of people working in green occupations, and this categorizes them into three different types of occupations. So those that are in increased demand due to greening, so not necessarily any changes in worker requirements. So these include programmers, scientists, electricians, and then we have those that are will need sort of set of enhanced skills, so that their requirements of jobs may change kind of slightly. So we have in there things like plumbers, heating and ventilation engineers. So the requirements for those roles will change over time. And then we have those kind of new and emerging occupations. So those that will be completely new, those jobs that will be created as a result of the green economy. So these are likely to be included within kind of consultancy, engineering types of roles as well. So so we use some data from the I think it's annual population survey. We've requested some specific data from the Office for National Statistics to quantify the number of people working in these different types of roles in the region. And then another thing we do using the Lightcast database of job postings. So they have use a taxonomy of different types of green skills, and this is a thing we went through in more detail in the report. So Mike, if you can just skip a few slides ahead, and this is not SIT code specific at all. So they analyze a whole range of online job postings and include information on which skills are requested in each job posting, and so we've used information to find out which skills kind of have been most in demand in the regional economy over the last 5 years. So we went through this earlier, but we've got lots of information on that within the report, so hopefully you'll have access to that and can have a look at it in more detail. And please let us know if you've got any questions about it or if you want any further information.
As we've just demonstrated here, there's a lot of material within the presentation, but even more than that, actually, within the report itself that we've had to skip over today in the interests of time. But if you've got the time, do check in with it. There's a lot of detail there. And if you have any thoughts, either indeed on the issues that are up on the screen there, or with any of the content that you come across, I'm happy to address those. And take any sort of questions offline if you have them. And yeah, I think that's everything from us. But thank you for spending the time today. I know it's a lot of content to look through and a lot of numbers and charts and things, but hopefully you found it helpful. And thanks for your time.
Mike, Hannah, Connor, thank you all so much, and thank you for our attendees. But please, if you are taking action on these priority areas, please do let us know. And really importantly, if you're interested in getting involved and helping us to take action as a collaborative effort across the region, then please do get in touch.